Quorum being present, this special town meeting shall now come to order. We have a return of the warrant by Constable Adam Loomis. As required by Massachusetts state law, the chief of the fire department, Scott Duffy, asked that I point out the exits from the auditorium in case of an emergency, which are down to my left and right and to the two exits when you came into the hall tonight. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. This special town meeting is being videotaped by WRPS. All non-registered citizens and guests must be seated to my left in the front rows of the auditorium section to my left. I'd like to welcome everyone for coming tonight. It's the Finance Committee. I want you to know the Finance Committee I've still got openings. It's a committee of 15. We've had about 12 on the average, and we're down to 8. So if somebody wants to help out this winter, it would be great. Contact the town hall or contact me. As you know, Article 29 of the 2013 annual town meeting reduced the quorum to open the town meeting to 150 registered voters. Once the meeting is opened, only 50 registered voters need to be present at this session or any adjourned session, which is approved by the Attorney General on July 26, 2013. If you wish to speak on an article, please raise your hand. When I recognize you, please come to one of the microphones down front, state your name and address before speaking. And with the lights that hit me sometimes, I don't always see, I can be blinded. If I don't, make sure you stand up and raise your hand. Each speaker will be allowed up to 5 minutes when speaking on an article which is being acted upon. No speaker who has previously spoken on the same article will be recognized until all others who wish to speak have had their opportunity. I'd like to introduce the people to my left. The very left is Attorney Dennis Murphy. He's the land use counsel for this town meeting. Doug Lapp, the town administrator. John Clifford, town council for the town of Rockland, and Liza Landry, the town clerk. The FinCom would introduce John Pumphrey. John, there's no microphone there? John, come over to this one, would you please?
Yeah, there we go. That's better. All right, Mr.
The other one's on now.
This is on. This is on. It's working.
They're messing with you, John.
Mr. Moderator.
Very good.
I gotta stand back now. I make a motion that the first action on each article will be on the Finance Committee recommendation with the exceptions of Article 9, 10, and 11, which are not voted on.
Do I have a second? All those in favor of the motion by the Finance Committee Chairman signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. I will now swear in my tellers. Would Mary Ryan, Jamie Hennessy, and Christine Campanile please come forward? Article number 1, will the town vote to raise and appropriate or take from available funds a sum of $300,000 for unanticipated and extraordinary fiscal year '24 special education costs or take any other action relative thereto? These unanticipated costs must be paid in the current fiscal year, requested by the school committee. Approval recommended by the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the Finance Committee. The funding source is from free cash. All those in favor of adopting Article 1 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. Article number 2, will the town vote to raise and appropriate or take from available funds a sum of $150,000 to update the feasibility study completed for a new fire station to be located at 99 Church Street, and to complete a new feasibility study for necessary improvements at the current fire station located at 360 Union Street, or take any other action relative thereto. The emergency, this will fund an updated feasibility study that takes into consideration the feedback from the May 2023 annual town meeting and ballot votes pertinent to the building of a new fire station and/or renovations to the current fire station headquarters. Time is of the essence, as there are serious health and safety concerns in the existing building, as well as several large private commercial and residential developments currently being permitted by the town's regulatory boards that may require additional fire and EMS services in the future. It was requested by the fire chief. Approval was recommended by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. The funding source is free cash. All those in favor of adopting Article... Yes? You certainly may. Stand up and come on down. If you could turn the microphone around and face the people. You don't have to be back to.
Yeah, my name is Richard Laurier Sr., 1 Leah Drive, Rockland. First thing I want to say is I don't like the way you put free cash. There's no free cash. If there's money left over, it should go back to the taxpayers. Please don't say free cash. It's not free. As far as $150, I appreciate what you people are trying to do. You cannot make up 40 years of neglect in this town. The streets, the schools, all the public buildings, the roads. I know you're doing a great job getting everything fixed up, but there's a limit to what people can afford to pay. You get that the high school is done over, the junior high, the stadium, the grammar school, the police station a while back. It's just every time you turn around, it seems to be another special assessment. Why do we need another survey for the fire department? I say take that $150,000 and make the necessary repairs with that money instead of doing another survey, and fix the old fire station for 2 or 3, 4 years, and then bring it back after everybody has a break occasionally from additional fees on their taxes. It's just getting to be too much. There are certain people that can afford it, but most people in this town cannot afford it. We pay more money in taxes than Norwell, Hanover, Abington, you name it. We're the highest ones around. We appreciate what you're doing, but you can't make up for 40 years of neglect in 8 or 10 years. It just can't be done. So that's all I have to say about that. I just want you to take that money and use it to something better than another survey. And please stop using the phrase free cash. It's not free, it's taxpayer money.
Chair recognizes the Town Administrator, Doug Lapp.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I do understand where you're coming from. Just so everyone is aware, we did not make up the term free cash. Free cash is a technical term from the State Department of Revenue. So that is, like it or not, that is the appropriate term for surplus revenue that every town uses and every town meeting warrants. So that's not something that we made up, and there's certainly no offense intended by it. It's a Department of Revenue term. I also just want to highlight that we don't have the highest taxes around. At our last annual town meeting, We gave an extensive presentation on the proposed fire station project, which failed, as we know, and we showed a chart at that time that I believe we're below the average and below the median in our county, which obviously includes the towns in our region. Lastly, I would just say that we heard the feedback at the last annual town meeting and the last annual town election. Voters told us very clearly you did not support the project. It was too expensive, and we were specifically directed by voters to go back and look at making the project smaller, less expensive, and to look at what types of alternatives could be done at the existing station, and that's exactly what this study is intended to do. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting Article 2 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. We'll try it one more time. All those in favor of adopting Article 2 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed. All right, my counters come forward. All those in favor of adopting Article 2, hold your hand up until the counter has gone by. Article number 3, I'm sorry, Section 3, 51. One more time. 5-4. Section 1. 51. 5-1. Section 2, Christine? 79. Okay. All those in favor, all those opposed signify with the show of hands and hold them up until the counter has gone by. Section 3, 18. Section 1, 10. Section 2. The final count is those in favor, 184, those opposed, 72. You have voted to adopt the article. Article 3, will the town vote to raise and appropriate or take from available funds a sum of $4,102.86 for the purpose of a federal grant match for the fire department or take any other action relative thereto. This appropriation is time-sensitive to receive this federal grant match for elevator rescue and forcible entry training. Requested by the fire chief, approval recommended by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Funding source is free cash. All those in favor of adopting Article number 3, signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. Article number 4. Will the town vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, and/or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $100,000 to supplement the funding authorized from Article 35 and 36 from the May 1st, 2023 annual town meeting for the replacement of the flat rubber membrane roof and rooftop HVAC unit at the Rockland Police Station? The emergency is this additional appropriation is necessary as there has been significant price inflation since the May 2023 town meeting appropriation, and the HVAC project now needs to have a complete electronic control system upgrade. This appropriation is time-sensitive as the roof is leaking and the HVAC unit is failing. Requested by the police chief, approval recommended by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, and the funding source is free cash. All those in favor of adopting Article 4 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. Article number 5. Will the town vote to approve and expend from the Community Preservation Fund the sum of $100,000 for the local matching contribution for grants to supplement construction costs for the conversion of the former Holy Family School to senior housing at the Schoolhouse Apartment Project located at 6 Delpreet Avenue, or take any other action relative thereto? The emergency time is of the essence for the applicant to be eligible for significant federal and state grant subsidies for this project. It was requested by the Community Preservation Committee, is approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Community Preservation Committee, and the Finance Committee defers to the Community Preservation Committee. So is the chairman of the finance, is that you, Steve? Just state your name and address, Steve.
Good evening. My name is Steve O'Donnell, Chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee in Rockland, and I live at 71 Wanding Way. Article 5 follows in line with the precedent set to fund requests like these at $100,000 when we, on the Community Preservation Act Committee, and the town voted to fund the Copley Gardens Affordable Housing Project, which allowed NeighborWorks LLC to apply and receive a state grant to help offset costs associated with creating additional affordable housing inventory in town. Article 5 was unanimously approved by the committee to help fund the Schoolhouse Apartment Project to convert the old Holy Family School into affordable senior housing. Further, in order for the developers to be eligible for grant money from the state, the town of Rockland must contribute to the project. The article will not raise taxes and will be funded from previous CPAC tax receipts and matching state funds. The state requires CPAC to spend 10% of its funds on affordable housing. I can think of no other project more worthy than this one. I make a motion for Article 5 to be voted on in the affirmative by the people of Rockland here tonight.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second to adopt Article 5. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting Article 5 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. Article 6, will the town vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, and/or transfer from available funds an additional sum of $2,866.93 to correct the fiscal year 24 salary for the public library director as follows? And that appears in front of you. This appropriation is necessary to cover a shortfall in the fiscal year 24 budget requested by the town accountant. Approval recommended by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. The funding source is raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds. John, do we have or Doug, do we have which one is it going to be?
It will be a transfer from available funds.
Transfer from it's going to be from transfer from available funds. All those in favor of adopting Article 6 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. Article number 7. Will the town vote to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 110A, office hours on Saturday, or take any other action relative thereto? This vote, the emergency is this vote is needed to avoid incurring unnecessary overtime expenses on Saturdays in the town clerk's office. requested by the town clerk, approval recommended by the Board of Selectmen, and there was not heard by the Finance Committee. I need a motion, and Selectman Needham is here to make a motion, I assume.
My name is Tiffany Williams Needham, and I live at 20 Payson Ave in Rockland. I move to adopt Article 7 as printed in the warrant.
I have a motion and a second to adopt it as printed in the warrant. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adopting Article 7 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. Article number 8, will the town vote to authorize the accounting department to pay the unpaid bills totaling $1,438.08 on file with the town clerk from a prior year as of June 30th, 2023, from the current year department budget, or take any other action relative thereto. The emergency is above named invoices were unpaid on June 30th and were not received or requested in time to meet the deadline to be paid via encumbrances. An encumbrance, by the way, is we have to have it in prior to the 15th of July to pay it out of the prior year's budget. The invoices should be paid as soon as practical to minimize hardship for the vendors. It's requested by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Finance Committee. Funding source, the fiscal year 2024 department budget. This requires a 9/10 vote, as it's an unpaid bill. I would like to have it unanimous. All those in favor of Article 8 signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's unanimous. Now we come to the Articles 9, 10, and 11. Ladies and gentlemen, after research, the moderator has the ability to, on this zoning issue, we're going to talk about all three articles. We're not going to talk about 9 and then take a vote and then start all over and talk about 10 and do the same thing with 11. We're going to, if people have questions, and I know you're going to have questions, I don't care if it's about Article 9, if it's about Article 10, which is the map, if it's about Article 11. We're going to encumbrances all into the same thing. This is going to be one big article of these three. And when the time comes to vote tonight, we're going to take one vote. I am allowed by law to do that, but we'll have discussion. It doesn't matter what you want to talk about on the articles, on the zoning issues, but we're going to take one vote in the end. The first article is, will the town vote to approve the zoning and land use bylaws for the Naval Air Station South Weymouth, including the Master Development Plan entitled Master Development Plan Mixed Use Development District, with core development area dated March 3rd, 2023, and accompanying supporting materials, and on file with the town clerk, or take any other action relative thereto. The emergency is this vote must be taken to comply with the Chapter 291 of the Acts of 2014. It's requested by the Planning Board, the Board of Selectmen, and approval recommended by the Planning Board, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and the Southfield Redevelopment. Funding source is not. There's no, and it requires a 2/3 vote. Article 10, will the town vote to approve the South Weymouth Naval Air Station zoning district map, Exhibit A, dated May 23rd, 2023, and on file with the town clerk as shown in your booklets, or take any other action relative thereto, and it's the same emergency. It's requested by the same people. Article number 11, will the town vote to amend the Rockland zoning bylaw and map and provide that, notwithstanding anything to the contrary to the Rockland zoning bylaw and map, any land located within Rockland that is also located within the boundaries of the former South Weymouth Naval Air Station shall be governed by the relevant Southfield Development Authority documentation, including the zoning and land use bylaws for the Naval Air Station South Weymouth and the South Weymouth Naval Air Station zoning district map, Exhibit A, dated May 23rd, 2023, Each is on file with the town clerk or take any other action relative thereto. The emergency request and approval and funding source is all the same. The moderator would begin this with recognizing the planning board.
Charles Williams, Acting Chairman, 5 Topping, of the Planning Board, 5 Topping Ave. On September 26, 2023, in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the duly elected Town of Rockland Planning Board held its duly noticed and advertised public hearing to review the proposed zoning amendments contained in Articles 9, 10, and 11. After reviewing the proposed amendments and hearing from proponents and the public concerning the articles, the Planning Board voted unanimously to favorably recommend that town meeting approve Articles 9, 10, and 11 as presented in the warrant. The zoning amendments proposed in Articles 9, 10, and 11 provide critically needed updates to Union Point's zoning bylaws and its zoning map. The most significant revision is the creation of the new zoning district called the Mixed Use Development District, which encompasses land in all 3 communities, Weymouth, Rockland, and Abington. If the proposed new zoning map is approved, the air-based land situated in Rockland will be comprised principally of 2 zoning districts. Zoning District Number 1, the Open Space District, and Zoning District Number 2, the Mixed Use Development District. We think it is critical to mention that the same 2 districts and the identical zoning changes have already been approved for the land in Abington and the majority of the land in Weymouth that will be either Open Space District or Mixed Use Development District. The proposed zoning amendments allow the airbase to be developed with a mix of commercial and residential properties based on market demands over the next 15 to 20 years. For any construction projects in Rockland, the Town of Rockland Building Department will retain jurisdiction, receive all fees, and will issue all building permits and conduct all inspections. It should also be noted that all federal, state, and local wetlands regulations shall continue to apply to any development in any portion of Union Point. Because these proposed zoning amendments will have no effect on the requirement for any and all construction to abide by all federal, state, and local environmental regulations. The Planning Board also thoughtfully considered the information and questions by the few interested parties who attended the public hearing. Any concerns regarding the future of the site under the new zoning scheme were answered with clear and concise answers from proponents, the town officials, officials from Southfield Redevelopment, and various peer review consultants and/or land use and special counsel. The Planning Board believes that the proposed zoning amendments offered in Articles 9, 10, and 11 are reasonably flexible without giving up local control, will provide a larger buffer of open space around the perimeter of the airbase, with 82% of the land will be permanently protected as open space. For all of these reasons, the Rockland Planning Board moves that Articles 9, 10, and 11 be approved as presented in the warrant, Mr. Moderator.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Now, before we go any further, the developer, along with the Southfield Redevelopment Authority members, are going to give a presentation. They've assured me it's not going to be that long. And then hopefully everybody that's here will understand and they'll have their questions ready. So at that, I would entertain that Mr. Tuig from the Southfield Redevelopment come up and take us through the presentation, what you see up on the screen. Mr. Tuig, it's in your hands right now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think you elevated me, though, to be part of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, and I appreciate that.
No, I actually meant the 2 members, of the 2 Rockland members, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, quite all right. Well, good evening. And I want to thank Moderator Henderson, the members of the Board of Selectmen, Finance, and Planning Board, and especially you, the voters of Rockland, for allowing us to speak and to go through the presentation that we have with you tonight. As the moderator mentioned, my name is John Tuig. I'm with New England Development. And with Brookfield Properties, we were appointed the new master developer for what is commonly known as Union Point. I've been told by the moderator that I'm to be efficient in my time, so hopefully I can walk you through some of the background of the project in the next sort of 15 minutes. So let's get started. It's not the easiest thing to talk about a project of this size and complexity in 15 minutes, but we will try. You probably may hear from two of my colleagues. One, Attorney Tim Sullivan is to my left. He's from Gleason and Storrs. He's our zoning expert and has spent a lot of time working on the zoning. And also Bob Daler, who is a Rockland native, who is our chief engineer on this project. Again, difficult to sort of figure out how to explain this, so I guess I went back to the old rules, which is sort of the who, what, where, why, and how, and try to explain it to you that way, and to make it as simplified as we could. So with that, moving to the agenda, and we're going to sort of touch on all of these issues. A little bit about who we are. We think it's important that you know a little bit about NED in Brookfield. We're asking you to come into your community, to become part of that community, to work in your community, to develop here. We're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves. Where we are, what is the land in Rockland? People talk about the base, but we're going to talk very specifically about what's in Rockland. What we want to do, what's our vision? Now, we have a whole presentation. We could spend the next 20 minutes on that, but by then the moderator will certainly have shuffled me off the podium here. I'm going to touch a little bit on it, though. What's the process been? We've been working in months in Rockland. Thought it's very important that you know what we've been doing. How will we address issues? And what do we mean by that? If you're in Rockland, you're talking about water, you're talking about sewer, you're talking about transportation, we're talking about money and fiscal. We're going to talk and touch on each one of those topics for a minute. We're going to touch on what's before the town meeting. Obviously, you have the town warrant. You see what the articles are. We're going to touch a little bit deeper on what that is. And then unusually, we added a section here called What We've Heard. And those are things that we've heard while we've been out in the community, whether we're at Council on Aging or we're over at Leisure Woods or we're in front of the planning board. We're going to touch a little bit about some of the things we've heard, seen on social media, so that you sort of have an understanding, and we hope maybe correct a few misconceptions about the project. And then finally, why should you vote yes? We're going to touch on that a little bit too. So a little bit about who we are. New England Development, founded about 40 years ago. We've probably developed about 50 million square feet of space. It was founded by our current chairman, Steve Karp. Originally, we were a regional shopping mall developer. If you go into a Simon Mall, pretty much anywhere from Florida to Maine, that was a mall that New England Development probably did. About 20 years ago, we morphed into doing more mixed-use projects and doing lab and pharmaceuticals and residential projects. That was a little bit about New England Development. We're based in Boston, always have been. We are all local folks, and that's a little bit about New England Development. I put a couple of representative projects up on the screen there. One is University Station in Westwood. If you know where Amtrak is, if you know University Station, where the train station is, you know where the Wegmans, we brought Wegmans to Massachusetts. If you go there today, you're going to find 2 million square feet of space. You're going to see a lot of retail. You're going to see a lot of housing. You're going to see Citizens Bank regional headquarters. You're going to see Brigham and Women's Hospital has a unit there. You're about to see probably over the next year or so, Paul Sincotta, who's my colleague who you don't really see because he's hiding behind doing on our computer. But Paul and I have worked for the last 10 years to develop University Station, and Dana-Farber is about to build their new brain cancer center there, a project we're very proud of. Why do I talk about this project? It has a lot of familiarities to Union Point, a failed project taken over by the bank where all the permits were in default, and they took a lot of pension money and wasted it. That's a lot of what Union Point is. And I talk about that because these projects, as dire as it may seem, can be resurrected, they can be thought of again, and they can move through the permitting process. We do complex, large, long-term projects. It's sort of what New England Development has always done. Another project, Pine Hills, a little closer to home, down in Plymouth. 3,000 acres, about 2,500 homes have been built there. We got about another 400 or 500 to do. A planned community, if you know it, it's been a very popular and interesting place in this area. Third project, Cambridge Side. If you know Cambridge at all, and you know the Cambridge Side Galleria, as it was once called, was a very innovative in 1987. I started working on it in 1987. I was but a child when I was doing that. I was a young attorney working for Steve Karp. And it was a 3-level mall down and a 3-level mall up, and it was all retail. And it was anchored by a Lechmere and it had a Filene's, what became Macy's, and we had a Sears. So I'm really dating myself, but did anyone buy their first camera at Lechmere? I mean, you know, most people did. But in any event, that's what it was, and that was a really cool place. Now, what has happened over time? Things have changed. Sears went away one day. They called us on December 9th and said, we're going to close. Lechmere went away, and eventually Macy's went away. So we had to rethink that space. If you go there at the end of this month, you're going to see a brand new 360,000 square foot office pharmaceutical building opening up, 11-story building where the old Macy's was. You're also going to see a 250,000 square foot pharmaceutical building where the Sears used to be. The reason I tell you about that project is to just give you a little bit of a sense of who we are. I literally did start that project in 1987. We've owned it, redeveloped it twice, rethought about it. It just gives you a message when we come into a community, we often stay. We stay for a long time, and we really take a project and become part of that community, as we have been if you ask anyone in Cambridge. A little bit about Brookfield. That's New England Development. Brookfield is, depending on the day, the first or second largest worldwide global real estate company. You don't see them up here. They sort of come up to New York and then stop, although one of their projects at MIT University I showed you up here on the screen. We're very excited to joint venture with Brookfield. They're a very large company. They've done 50 or 60 planned communities. They're primarily a commercial developer. This is our first opportunity to be able to work together, and they're here tonight. And again, I think they're very excited about moving forward. So why do I tell you all this? You have two companies as a master developer, one that are local, that have been successful, and are used to living through the long haul, because that's the kind of project that this is, and this project has failed 4 times. We do not want to be the 5th. That's a little bit about us. The land in Rockland. So I'm going to talk about the where. What you see there is in the middle, outlined in red, is in Rockland. Over 500 acres that are in Rockland. Much of the base, if you go up there, the taxiways and runways still exist. Some of the pictures that you see, these are all current photos of what's there. There are 1,274 homes that are built in Weymouth, but nothing has been built in Rockland. Nothing has been built in Abington. It's primarily vacant, debris piles. It does have, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, the second largest eastern box turtle habitat that is actively monitored in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we should all be proud because it's mostly in Rockland. But that is an area of habitat that's closely controlled, and I will talk a little bit about that. So that's the where, that's what we're talking about, that land that you see there. Okay, so what's our vision of that? Well, these maps aren't great. That's 1,400 acres on that map. And if you think about it, in the areas that are there, when we looked at this originally, we started thinking about, we have all this northern open space up here in Weymouth, and here's where the existing development is. And just for sort of orientation, obviously, Route 18, the parkway that goes through, out to Rockland, 228 Route 3. You've got Weymouth, sort of everything is here. You've got Abington, and then about 40% of the site is here in Rockland. That's the site. So we thought, how do you connect the southern open space, the northern open space, and you have all these huge runways that run through it. These are 200 feet wide, 50 feet then again on each side. If you think about how those green connectors could be used to create a place that people could live and work and sort of connect the open space and the trails, that's what actually our vision is for this open space. And we'll show you the zoning where we sort of create a perimeter open space all the way around and then sort of develop. And again, we're trying to develop in the areas that have existing runways, taxiways, former foundations of buildings where the hangars are. So that's a little bit about what our vision. Respect what's been built, respect the habitat that's there, but create a place. Because if you go there right now, and the people who live there, 2,000 people live there, and we spent a lot of time with them, they would tell you there is no there. There is no place. There's no place to get a cup of coffee. There's no place to drop off your dry cleaning. One of the first things that we promised the folks who live there today was to build a town center, probably in this area, where you'd actually have some of those amenities. So that's what our vision is. Now, we could go on for 20 minutes on our vision, but again, we won't. So, as we move forward, what have we been doing? Well, I'm going to step back for a minute. It's not up here on the slide. Been working on this for quite a while. We had to reassemble all the land because much of it had been had multiple owners, so we had to reassemble all the land. Then we had to rewrite new zoning, new redevelopment plan. work with the Southfield Redevelopment Authority and their council, develop new zoning, get that passed in March, which we did. We then had to go to Weymouth, multiple meetings in Weymouth with all kinds of committees. We had unanimous support from their planning board, their finance group, and their council. We then had to go to Abington. We went to Abington, again, finance, board of selectmen, unanimous approval. We were able to go to a town meeting, much like we are here today, but it was on a Saturday. 309 people came, supported what we're trying to do, and here we are in Rockland. That's the process we've been through. We're not crazy about this process, but there's a state statute that says this is what you got to do. You have 90 days, you have to go through each community, and you have to get the zoning all approved, and it has to be the same zoning that you do. Not crazy about it. It was it's what we inherited to have to deal with. So here we sit, and for the last 3 months, we've been working in Rockland, meeting with the town administrator, meeting with planning department, department heads, police chief, fire chief, open space committee, the schools, council on aging, going to people to tell them a little bit of what I'm going to tell you tonight. Now, all of that culminated in these recommendations. Planning board on September 26th, Board of Selectmen on October 17th, Finance Committee on October 18th, and then where we are tonight. So that's been the process. So it's been a very involved, very vibrant, a lot of questions. Some of the meetings go on for 3 hours plus to talk to people about what we're trying to do. So how are we going to address issues? Well, water. And you're going to hear this as a little bit of a theme. There isn't any. A little bit in Weymouth, but there really isn't any here. We have to solve the water problem if we're going to go forward on the base. And we have said all along that if we can't solve issues like water and sewer, we're not going to go forward with the project. That's our risk. Some of the commentary is going to be, well, it's going to hurt Rockland because it's going to take out water and sewer. You don't have any. We have to create that. The state requires us, because of some filings that we made, to study two different things. One, MWRA water coming down into this region. The water's up in the Blue Hills. We call this map up here affectionately the spaghetti map. The idea of the water that sits up here in the Blue Hills and bringing it down towards the base. One thing the MWRA has is water. They have 100 million gallons a day of water that they waste. So they have water, but it's 7 miles away. The other thing we're required to study is down in the south. And that's bringing that up through what they call Aquaria. The city of Brockton happens to control a desalination plant. And at Peaceful Meadows, there happens to be a 36-inch pipe that could bring water to the base and up into this area and up actually into Abington and Rockland. Yes, I said Peaceful Meadows. I know some people are going to say it's Hornstras, but I can't deal with that, so I'm not going to do it. But up on Route 18. So we're studying that. Do we have the answer for that? Absolutely not. Do we need to finish our local zoning so that we can go forward working with the state? We've spent a lot of money on it. We've done a lot of research. Weymouth is actually, and the Southfield Redevelopment Authority are applying to become MWRA communities on the long term. Can we, and we've been told by your selectmen, whatever you do, find a way to help us in Rockland by getting more supply, not taking what Rockland has, but adding to what it has. So that's what we're trying to do in the water world. Sewer. I think everybody in this room knows Rockland has tremendous sewer issues. We've spent a lot of time trying to, and we have reports that we got in a few weeks ago to understand what could be done, what your issues are. They're very significant. Are there ways to be able to do what they call I&I, to be able to reduce some of the flows? Are there ways that we could bring in other communities that could help support? Are there ways to take some of the flow? We've even looked at doing an on-site wastewater treatment plant, which for a lot of reasons, including contamination, we can't really deal with. But we don't have an answer to it, but we're trying to solve that and work with town of Rockland. It's one of the things, again, that we have to work through on the state level. Stormwater. Again, things that we're working forward. Most of the stormwater infrastructure that exists out there today was put in 1941. Some beautiful 48-inch corrugated pipes put in 1941. A couple of them. Some of the people have talked about stormwater concerns about the base. Well, rightfully so. So we asked Bob Daler and Tetra Tech and his group to design a stormwater system that would look at the entire redevelopment of the base and solve the issues not just now, but what we intend to do in the future. How do you stop the rate of runoff? How do you control it? How do you reduce it? And that's a plan of a fancy multicolored plan about how where different watersheds go and how things get broken out. But and out on the table there, and I noticed that Mr. Lapp put it on the table, there's about a 400-page stormwater report that we've done and submitted as part of this zoning. So we think that we can solve this. This is not an option not to be addressed, because long-term, if you're depending on infrastructure built in the 40s by the government when they were busy trying to build a base for dirigibles and subsequently for aircraft, that's not the long-term solution. So, water, sewer, stormwater. Transportation, we call this affectionately the Galaxy Plan. I don't know why they kind of call that because all the yellow dots, I guess, but we have over 70 intersections that we've identified. We've met multiple times with the state. No great surprise, but the former developer who had this at a lot of intersections they were supposed to do and fix up never did, all of which have to be looked at. We've identified, this slide says 30, we're up to about 45 intersections that need new signals, need widening, need signal timing, whatever the issue has to be. And a part, again, of our state approval process, after hopefully with your support, we can move into that part of the process, we have to fix all of the transportation issues so that it works for the communities that surround us. We've actually already started a year ago with Rockland in a MassWorks grant in providing some funding to be able to do some studies, because it takes that kind of time to address a lot of the issues that you have. So the last sort of process issue, things that we know, and we're trying to give you the information so you know we have been working on it, is what we call fiscal. Every community we come into, we do a fiscal study. What's a fiscal study? Well, fiscal study is to say, okay, well, if we were to do this project, what are going to be the revenues that may be generated by what we're going to build there? What are going to be the costs? Because anybody, whether you build a house or whatever you do, cost to the community, police, fire, schools. So we went back and we hired a firm called RKG. They mostly work for state governments and municipalities. We hired them and we said, we want you to look at the base. We want you to determine what does it mean if we were to build something here. And very unusually, they had an example, namely what's in Weymouth. Well, wait a minute, there's already 1,274 homes there. It's already at the base. Let's look at that. What kind of revenues does that generate for Weymouth? And I know Weymouth is not Rockland, Rockland is not Weymouth. But at the base, it gave us an idea, a place to start to say, what are the police calls like? What are the fire calls like? What does it really look like? We had them do all that, and what they concluded was that every year, after you would deduct police, fire, school, library cards, everything from Weymouth, Weymouth nets over $3 million a year from what's up at the base today. So we say, okay, all very interesting, but we got to talk to folks in Rockland. We want you to go and interview the police chief, the fire chief, talk to schools, look at all their budgets, figure out what does that mean in Rockland if we would develop, I mean, we're mostly commercial developers, so we develop a lot of commercial in Rockland, if we develop residential in Rockland, weighted average of it, depending on which one it was, what does that mean for Rockland if we were to build it all out? And what they concluded is what you see up there. If it's heavily commercial, heavily residential, ranges between $4 to $5.5 million in net dollars. Net dollars meaning that's after deducting costs for police, fire, schools, general administrative costs. We presented all this to your finance committee. We spent some time on it. We had the RKG people come down and present. We presented to some of your department heads just to be sure that we were right. Because the only calling card that we have as New England Development is talk to the folks in the last community that we worked in. I'll give you an example of Westwood. We presented the same kind of fiscal study to them 10 years ago. We predicted $7 million worth of net tax revenues. Today it's over 11.5. And that's something that we always try to be conservative on the revenue estimate and also slightly overstate the costs, because we don't want anybody to come to us someday 10 years later and say, gee, you said it was going to be X, it's really Y. We're very comfortable with those numbers for Rockland. Okay. Those are the things that we've been through the process, a little bit who we are, what we've been doing. What's actually before you? It's in your warrant. It's mentioned by the moderator, mentioned by the acting chair of the planning board. Really 3 articles. 9, 10, and 11. 9 focuses on a text. Most of the zoning text stayed the same. We did create a new Article 7A. One of the first things we heard when we got involved in this project for people who tried to develop on the base, I can't understand the zoning. It's got 38 different overlay districts. It's got all these different shapes to it. We met with Bob Luongo, who's the chief planner over in Weymouth, and he turned to me, and I don't know if you know Bob or any of you have ever met him, he turned and he said, he's been doing this a long time, he said, I got a whole box of stuff about this zoning. And he showed me the box. I don't understand any of it. And Bob Luongo's a pretty smart guy, and he's been doing this for 40 years. We were told by people who tried to develop at the base, we can't understand it. Rockland only has 13 zones. The base has 38. So we had to fix that, which is part of a map that we had to do. We had to create a map in Article 10. And that Article 11 is just sort of is to say to someone, if you're in Rockland, you want to develop in Rockland, you want to be at the base, go look at this zoning. Don't look at the general Rockland bylaws. But forgetting about all that, I just a couple of things. Zoning is the first part. It's not the last part. We have to show that we can demonstrate local support in the community for the zoning. We have to fix the zoning so we know what the rules of the road are going to be. We have to simplify the zoning. We have to do all that so that we can go forward. That's what tonight is about. It's about the first step. It's certainly not about the last. So I've told you a little bit about the who, what, where, all that. I'm going to do, and I don't normally do this. Normally as a team we don't sort of, I'll call it the what we've heard. But I have to tell you, there's some misinformation out there and some commentary that's not right. And we're going to try to correct it, or at least to tell you our view. And we've heard these things. You may have read them on social media. They've been at different meetings. Okay. Who has to solve the water and sewer problems? We do. Otherwise, we can't develop the base. Some people have said, oh, it's going to impact Rockland. We're not going to have any water and sewer. The base is going to take it all. Not true. You don't have any to give. We have to fix that, and we have to help you go forward. Second item. Oh, you said net tax revenue, but oh, that doesn't include police and fire and schools and all that. Not true. We only showed you the net tax revenue of $4 to $5 million. Net meaning we took all those costs out. Not insignificant. Police and fire on the base at full build-out could be $1 million, but that's all included in the numbers that we did. Are you going to have any? We heard this on our first day in Rockland. Oh, you're going to open up Union Street. We're not going to open up Union Street. That is a town decision. We have 2 access points on Route 18. We have the access point that comes to the Parkway, goes out to 228 and Route 3. That's all we're proposing. We've never proposed anything. Second thing that we've heard is, oh, you're going to run a road up Spruce Street, and you're going to kill all the turtles, and then you're going to come up and meet the Parkway. No, we're not doing that either. Matter of fact, we'd go to jail if we did that. Kill those turtles. We spend $80,000 a year to monitor those turtles. I don't think the state would appreciate it. Why does the zoning have to be approved now? Okay, that's a question that we have heard, and it's a sort of multi-part question when you think about it. The state wants to know that local communities support the zoning, support your ability to be able to develop. Before they're going to spend the next year reviewing what we call our MEPA filing, they want to know that the communities support the zoning and how it goes forward. The state wants to know that. The regulators want to know that. The regulators want to know that it's in support. And quite honestly, this base suffers from one huge problem: credibility. Nobody believes it can be developed. It has failed 4 times. We have to establish that, just like we did in Weymouth and just like we did in Abington, hopefully we're going to be doing here tonight in Rockland, that there is support for moving this forward so that we're going to be able to show you, and really we're asking your permission to let us try. I don't know if we can solve the water and sewer. We see the path forward, but this zoning at least tells us this is what you can do on the base. Go forward and see if you can solve the other problems to be able to move forward with the overall project. How many acres are going to be developed in Rockland? Another question that we've got. There's 584 acres in Rockland. So that's the area that kind of goes, this is all Rockland, kind of goes down here through Rockland. That's Rockland. About 82% of it is going to be restricted open space. And we're going to develop about 106 acres, about 18% of it. And that area is right in through there. Right off the Parkway, it happens to be where there's a taxiway and end of a runway. We showed you that on the earlier aerial. That's what we proposed to develop. Nothing more, nothing less. We have a lot of state processes that we have to go through to be able to do that, but that's what we're proposing from a pure development standpoint. Two things you ought to know. You may hear some of it tonight. Virtually all of the land in Rockland today is unbuildable. There's a 2009 conservation management permit on it today. Says you can't build on it. We're taking the risk that we're going to be able to convince you and to convince the state that this land in here, which is mostly runways and taxiways, ought to be developed. But that's what the state of affairs, it's a recorded title restriction that says, yeah, you can't build on virtually anything in Rockland. Now, why? Well, remember the thing I said about the eastern box turtles? Huge population of turtles here, some up here, and also grasslands, which is bird habitat. That's what's actually out there. So we're taking the risk that we're going to be able to address that. Now, there are two things you're going to hear. One, we're going to take a road and we're going to run a road up to get to the parkway and we're going to take it right through there and wipe out all the turtles from Spruce Street. Not true. Second thing you're going to hear, there's a meadow down here. They call it a meadow. It's about 19 acres. If you've ever been out to the base, there's a bunch of debris piles because that's where the runways were. And what have happened over the past several years? People have dumped all over it. And that still happens today. We have a huge security issue whenever you have 1,400 acres only partially developed and so there's nobody there on weekends and during the weekends and at nighttime. We have to, and our proposal is to take that, what they call the meadow, that 19 acres, and turn it into 104 acres of contiguous, connected grassland habitat. That's our proposal, to protect all this land. It happens to also be at the same place the eastern box turtles are. That's our proposal to Natural Heritage, which is the state agency that deals with it. So, what happens if the zoning doesn't pass and the redevelopment doesn't go forward? I should tell you this, I shouldn't, I'm gonna get myself in trouble because Paul Cincotta had a much better answer to this. And all he put was, nothing good. But we felt that was probably kind of snarky and not the kind of the answer we want to give. But, all right, if we don't go forward, there aren't any tax revenues. This is about generating income for the community. It's not about taking income out. There'll be no funding for the hazardous waste, for the base maintenance and security. There's a bunch of state bonds out there to build the parkway. There won't be monies available to pay that. And any preservation and creation. People talk about open space at the base and some of the old plans that were going to be there. But what you get and what you have is what was done because the project failed, which is nothing, which is runways and taxiways and foundations and things like that. So we feel very strongly that moving forward, there are benefits to the community. Not moving forward, they're not. So finally, and I'll wrap up here. Why should you vote yes? You don't know me, you've just sort of listened to us sort of talk about these things. Hopefully you've seen some of our presentations. We are going to try to work really hard on the water and sewer solutions. My boss asked me, he said, what is the one thing that bothers you about this project? And he said, he always asks, what keeps you up at night? It's water and sewer on this base. It's a real challenge. There's PFAS. I think everybody in the room's heard over the past year, what's PFAS, those forever chemicals? Well, what was the base? It was a place where you had fuel. How did they treat fuel? Fire foam, firefighter's foam. What is in firefighter foam? PFAS, because it did a great job in dealing with that. The site has got a lot on it, has to be treated. We've worked with the Navy for over a year. We've got the Navy to agree that the money that they're owed, they're gonna let us keep on the base so we can actually build a dewatering plant, which is in design right now, to treat the PFAS that's on the base. But that requires us to be able to go forward and actually have a project. I mentioned the bonds. This is depending on whose count and whose bond you want to talk to, is $30 to $50 million worth of bonds that's related to the base that have to be paid. They're supposed to be paid out of the revenues of the redevelopment. Hasn't happened. The other reason, creation of open space. Most of Rockland is going to be open space. Cleaning up the debris piles. If you go out there now, you're going to find 12 acres of debris piles. 12 acres of debris piles, 14, 20 feet tall, full with all kinds of stuff. We don't know what we're going to find when we start taking those down. But the state has said to us, they've been asking to have it taken down for over 5 years. We have to do that. Creation of habitat, protection of the eastern box turtle, and finally, new tax revenues. We're not asking for Rockland, we're trying to create tax revenues for the community, because that's sort of what we do. Sure, we get to develop something that we think we're going to be able to develop and build a great community, great series of businesses here. That's sort of our goal, but also to create revenues for the communities. So that's why we think you should vote yes on what we're doing. That's it. Thank you. I appreciate the time. We're obviously going to be here for questions.
Mr. Henderson, does anybody else is anybody else on this project going to speak, or is Mr. Toohey cleared everything up?
Mr. Toohey has done the presentation. I think Town Administrator was going to speak next.
Okay, I wanted to make sure before I left that. Mr. Lapp, you wanted to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I promise everyone I'll be very quick. As the moderator explained, while there are 3 separate articles before you tonight, they're all connected and they're all presented and should be discussed together as one single package, since they're all interrelated. These articles were all discussed at multiple public outreach meetings held in the community to discuss this proposal, and as you'll see in the warrant, they've been unanimously recommended by the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and the Finance Committee. Please also note that months ago, our Land Use Council recommended that to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest, that the town hire an independent land use attorney, Dennis Murphy, who's sitting to my left, to represent the town and Rockland voters at this special town meeting. Our regular Land Use Council attorney, Bob Galvin, also represents the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, which is the governmental authority that oversees the base and is supportive of the proposed zoning before you tonight. Attorney Murphy is an expert specializing in conservation law, who's met extensively with our Open Space Committee in multiple meetings leading up to this town meeting, and is here to answer any legal questions that any of you may have regarding these 3 articles. With that being said, I have 8 very brief comments that I would like to make. Number 1, the proposal before you will result in the vast majority of land being permanently set aside for open space and restricted with a new conservation restriction. As Mr. Toohey noted, the specific percentages in Rockland will be 82% open space and only 18% for development. And base-wide, almost 2/3 of the land will be open space. So I cannot stress this enough. Open space will be protected. Number 2, this project will provide urgently needed housing for our entire region. Number 3, it'll provide excellent construction jobs for our local union workforce and permanent employment for the commercial components of this project. Number 4, private developers working with the Navy will fully clean up the significant hazardous contamination that's remaining on site that's been there since it was used as an active military base. Number 5, private developers will address all their water and sewer infrastructure needs without negatively impacting our existing infrastructure at all. Number 6, this project will provide millions of dollars of net new growth to our tax levy, which will expand our commercial tax base and help the town improve its financial position and ease the burden on Rockland's taxpayers. Number 7, as you heard earlier tonight, all 3 towns that make up the old South Weymouth Naval Air Station land area must approve the identical zoning language. I want to stress that, identical zoning language. Weymouth and Abington have already both passed it, so it's solely up to Rockland now. So lastly, number 8, voters here in Rockland have clearly asked our town government here for other ways to increase revenue to the town that won't increase residential property taxes. This is the solution. Long-term new growth from Union Point with set-asides for open space, cleanup of contamination left by the military, and a means of addressing the water and sewer infrastructure needs of the former military base. For all those reasons, I urge town meeting to adopt this zoning without any amendments. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, I have a few comments.
Mr. Henderson,
Tom Henderson, Chairman of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, resident of Rockland, 102 Arlington Street, and the joint appointee to the committee with Kelly O'Brien McKinnon. I just have a few comments just to inform the community of where we were and what we've come to now. Several years ago, back in 2018, we had to remove the previous development team. It was not something we took lightly, but we had to do it because of the fails that they had. Water, sewer, infrastructure, loans. The land was taken by the bank, Washington Capital. We were in a conundrum. We had to go out to an RFP process. It took us several months to go through that process. And through that process, we were concerned whether or not we would get a development team to actually come to the base because of all the concerns and all the issues that it had. But we were very lucky. We had 2 proposals after our RFP process that went on for over 6 months. It involved the communities, it involved the members of the community from Southfield. Through that process, we were able to quickly realize that Brookfield and New England Development were really the ones to bring this development forward and move it into the future. We listened how they want to make sure that they complete all the necessary tasks, water, sewer, stormwater, traffic, things that the other developers did not do. They gave us a lot of lip service, but they never followed through with it. This group, they did it, and they've shown it so far. But we had to go through a process to incorporate them as our master developer, and that took several years to do that because the bank held the ownership of the land. We also had a problem where the previous developer owned the majority of the open space land, and we had to get that back, and we had to go through an eminent domain process that we did last October. That was a long and arduous process, but we got through it. One of the things this development team did, and they committed to the town of Rockland, was there were back taxes owed from that previous development team. They walked away. They weren't going to pay this town. But this development team came through, and over $300,000 of back tax revenue was paid, and they had no responsibility to pay that. They did it to do the right thing by the development and by the community. Again, this developer continues to say they're going to follow through on the necessary steps. They also have committed through numerous presentations that they're going to maintain the open space in Rockland. They're going to protect the habitat. They're going to clean up the debris piles that have been there for over 20 years. It's all positive for the town of Rockland. I cannot see any other reason why not to vote yes. So I ask you, join me. Please vote yes on Articles 9, 10, and 11. Support this zoning. Support this project. Support our community. But most of all, please support Rockland into the future. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to open it up to discussion from the audience. I'm sure that I have some. Gentleman had his hand up first.
Hi, my name's Corey Dussault. I live at 325 Webster Street. The airbase has sat vacant for almost 25 years with no benefit to this town. We have a chance to bring in $5 million in tax revenue. It's going to create good jobs for local men and women. If we let this opportunity pass, we could be waiting another 25 years. Thanks, guys.
Do I have anybody else that wants to speak?
Mr. Moderator.
Come right down.
Mary Parsons, 754 Union Street. I know that tonight it's going to be your decision whether to approve this project or ask them to wait 6 months and come back after questions have been answered. They talk about misinformation, but they've added misinformation. They're not cleaning up the base. The Navy is cleaning up the base. All they're doing is taking the money that they were to pay the Navy from the sale of property here to clean up the PFAS. It's a different story than cleaning up the base. They made it sound like they were doing that, but they're not. The Navy is already cleaning up the base on several Superfund sites. There's 11 of them. Currently, we're working on the solvent release area. So that in itself is a misconception, and there's no 82% of open space in Rockland. What you see when you see this map is you never see and never can read the notes that are down on the side, okay? No matter how hard you try, you can't read it. They have a core center development map, but they haven't showed it to you. On the note side that you can read, it does say they can build up to from 2,851 housing units up to 6,000 housing units. But they don't say where it's going to go. We have asked and asked for the acreage of where they're putting these things, because you need to know where that's supposed to happen. And I have a question, a legal question. Where in the current legislation does it say that we have to unanimously vote for the same plan? Because I couldn't find it, and I have that legislation.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The legislation is Chapter 291 of the Acts of 2014. It requires that the same zoning bylaws and rezoning be applicable to the entire base. That's already been adopted in Abington as well as South Weymouth. So it's Chapter 291.
Oh, no, Chapter 291 of the Acts of 2014. What I couldn't find is where it says that we all have to agree. I did find where a town can make changes and major changes to the zoning. I also found where it says that, you know, within 90 days we have to have a town meeting when changes are made, but it does not say all 3 towns have to agree.
Just to be clear, the law requires that when you rezone a parcel of land, that the map and the bylaws that span 3 towns be consistent. I think the commentator might have misspoken. It doesn't require a unanimous vote of any town. This is a 2/3 vote, the articles before town meeting, but it does require the same zoning and the same map be adopted in all 3 towns.
I couldn't find it. But anyway, in terms of, there's a whole section of open space that was acquired through the Lands to Parks program through the Department of Interior and the National Park Service. In that document, it states that there's 161 acres of open space in the Rockland section, and it is the buffer that goes around behind Greenwood Ave, Salem Street, Oregon Ave, and Union Street, and it's a buffer between the houses and whatever's built on the base. The issue I have with that is they don't show you that National Park Service land. The SRA can't sell it. They can't lease it. They only can turn it over to another federal entity that will keep it open space, but they don't show that. Why is that?
Mr. Moderator,
Yes?
the SRA has no intention of doing anything other than leaving the Park Service land as Park Service land. They're not changing it. That's not any intention, and that's no proposal from the current developer.
Good, that's good to know. The other issue, and I already sent it out, is we voted in 1998 to keep Union Street closed to general vehicular traffic. That's already been done.
So as Mr. Toohey pointed out, but as a resident of Rockland and on the SRA board, we have no intention right now in any
Good, so
proposal.
you're going to order that vote.
If I could finish, Mary, we have no proposal to open Union Street.
That's what we need to know.
Okay.
So whatever you decide tonight, these are the things you need to know. And has anyone read the 152-page zoning document? You have, Laurie? Good. Anyone else? Gentleman in the back, in the red. But no one else has read it.
Mary, don't be pointing, we're not taking a survey here.
No, I just asked a question. Thank you.
Who else? Gentleman over here. Yeah, come on down. You can use either microphone. Oh.
Kathy Kirby, 162 Liberty Street. Mr. Lapp just made reference to a new conservation restriction. No? Hello?
That's
How's that?
better.
Any better? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to grow 10 inches next year. Thank you. Mr. Lapp just made reference to a new conservation restriction on protected area in Rockland, and I'm not sure of what that consists. So I'd like that explained. Also, on August 14th, when Mr. Tuig was making his presentation before a public meeting, he was asked how many acres are in the new mixed-use development district, and he didn't know, nor did the development team know. This subject came up again on October 24th, when Attorney Murphy was at a public meeting, and he was asked if he had seen any written meets and bounds description of the MUDD or a survey map. He had not, but he did agree that the Rockland voters should have this information before being asked to vote on this proposal. Thank you.
But we're going to get, she had two questions. Who's going to answer the two questions? Attorney Murphy?
Yes, I can respond, but I just want to correct something the commentator said. She was characterizing advice that I gave or something I said at a meeting. I subsequently issued a written memo where I made it very clear to answer the Open Space Committee. Before town meeting in Article 10 is a map. That's all you need. There is no requirement in the law that you have any other legal description or survey or anything like that, notwithstanding anything that might have been discussed at a hearing. I've got a written memo on that subject. As far as the questions, one of the questions was Mr. Lapp's reference to, in his 8 points, I think what I wrote in my notes, the most important one for town meeting, is that 82% of the land in Rockland, which by my calculation of the 548 acres is 478 acres in this town, will be preserved as open space. I don't think that's up for debate. The other 18%, which is 106 acres by my calculation, will be zoned for development, and the scope of that development is also not up for debate tonight. I hope that was responsive to the questions. Thank you.
Come on down, sir.
Donald Can, 64 Union Street, Chairman of the Open Space Committee. We are one of those committees in town that indeed had meetings with the developers, town administrator, selectmen, the Southfield Board. And I thank you, all of you, for attending those meetings. And we've been dealing with open space on the base for 23 years. We have some accomplishments. We were there when the public benefit from the National Park Service for the green space around the perimeter. We also got two parcels that the Navy owned and were able to expand the town forest from North Avenue all the way to Spruce Street. We were there for the design and the layout of the two trails that we have on Spruce Street, the base has on Spruce Street, one going up into the Twin Ponds, the other one going to Thompson Pond as well. And our duty is to protect wildlife, to increase open space, to protect all of the resources of open space that Rockland has and can get. So the zoning troubles us. What you see in the map you're going to vote on is an area that doesn't say so open space. It's a multiple use district, zoning district, and on top of that, the developer has put some open space. This land mostly is under restrictions from the state's natural heritage because of two birds, the upland sandpiper and the grasshopper sparrow, both listed birds. It's grassland. It's an unusual place for the South Shore and indeed Rockland. It has a grand expanse of grassland. It's almost like a big sky area. So we're concerned about this because of the zoning that's being put on it. It's a developable zone. It's not an open space zone. The developer, yes, has said that he would overlay some open space, but we would ask for some written documents that would confirm this. We don't have those. We also know that any changes in this area have to go to the state because they have registered this as a protected land through the county registry of deeds, two counties, Norfolk and Plymouth County. We do have some maps to show a little bit better what we're talking about, and invite Mr. Bromberg, Michael Bromberg, who is the vice chairman of the...
Excuse me, Donald. Donald, you continue talking, I'll call on the next person.
I'm sorry?
You continue doing yours, I will call on the next person.
All right. One other thing is in the article of the what is allowed in the zoning bylaw, the permitted uses, we're troubled by that. As likewise, permitted uses as cell towers, arrays, roads, lights, golf courses, and many other things that really don't fit in open space as we see it. So interest in protecting the wildlife, protecting the habitat, gives us a question about whether this is a good idea. And the other consideration is, yes, there's a percentage overlay over this area. We would really like to have a written document on this.
Are you done?
That's the end of my, Mr. Moderator, that's the end of my initial
Okay.
talk, but could I invite Mr. Bromberg down to show us the maps that helps illustrate?
Excuse me, Attorney Murphy would like to address what you said.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I heard 3 points. One is about the role of the Open Space Committee. I want to be very clear that the Open Space Committee is advisory to the Board of Selectmen. It has no official role in town meeting. The 3 boards that do unanimously have recommended adoption of the articles. That's the Planning Board, the FinCom, and your Board of Selectmen. The second point is that the gentleman that commented is looking for some written documents, some kind of assurance. The articles that are before town meeting, it would not be proper to have any kind of side agreement or separate understanding that's not contained within the 4 corners of the warrant. So I think that is not something that town meeting could entertain. And the final point, I think, had to do with permitted uses in the open space. Those are in Article 9, and he is accurate that they do include some uses, such as roads and trails, cell towers, and so forth, but it does not allow development per se. So you're not going to see structures and buildings and housing in the open space. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, I have the duties of the Open Space Committee, and I would like to pass it because it does reference to the Open Space Committee will make reports to town meeting.
Anyone else? This gentleman had his hand up. It's hard to see up here. I hope I get the right person.
Larry Ryan, 121 Concord Street, former selectman, been around this for 20-something years. 20 years ago, we sat in the same place and we decided we're going to give these persons a chance to develop something on the base. The only way we would do it was to agree with what the three towns all wanted to do. We're back at the exact same spot again in history, except for there's been a few more developments over there that have gone on because of the past guys that failed. So now we have to decide, are we going to just go backwards and wait to see what the state charges us or puts the taxes on us or costs us a fortune and not do anything? No, we don't. This is the exact same argument we had before. The exact same people are causing the exact same arguments against. And I would like to discuss, I went to a meeting over at the golf course the other night to discuss this with these gentlemen over here. And I was appalled at the arrogance, the rudeness of our committee and certain members of this community who spoke out yelling and screaming that they wanted what they want and the hell with everybody else. Well, that committee has no authority to enter into any agreement with anybody. They work for the town, not for the Open Space Committee. So they have no authority, and they sit there, and I saw them screaming, Mr. Bromberg, give us a memorandum of agreement. Do this for us, do this for us. And this other person over there screaming, put this back up here, put that back up here, not asking questions, not raising their hands, arrogance and disrespect. Is that what we got in the town of Rockland now? Are we going to go and let people be arrogant? You saw it on the other night on TV.
Larry.
Vote yes and stop being arrogant.
Larry. Hey. Larry's not the only one, I can tell.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
Tom Henderson, 102 Arlington Street. We've been at this for a bit of time. I ask that we move the question.
I have a motion and multiple seconds to move the question.
Yeah, it does. You got to take a vote. You got to vote.
All right, we're gonna, excuse me. Do you want to listen to me or do you want to run the meeting? I'm going to give Mr. Bromberg, and I think that's who it is. I'm going to give him allowed to speak. And I'm going to give it another 10 minutes before we move the question. I'm sorry, but that's my decision. This is my decision. I am going to allow Mr. Bromberg to speak. Mr. Bromberg.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Bromberg, 373 Forest Street. For the record, I wasn't screaming at any meeting at a golf course. I wasn't screaming at any meeting at a golf course, I assure you that. I asked a couple of questions. So, but I do have some comments here. I'm on the Open Space Committee. Been involved up there for over 20 years. And I'm not going to ask anybody to vote against this or for it, but I just want to present some facts to the townspeople here before they vote on this tonight.
Mr. Bromberg, nobody's going to be able to see those maps, the entire community. You're welcome to speak.
Okay. So I have some questions for the attorney, if I could. Can I raise this thing?
One at a time. One question at a time. You can always come to the other microphone, Mr. Bromberg.
Okay, thanks, Bob. For the attorney, if I could ask, and I appreciate all the information coming back and forth from you, Attorney Murphy. I still remain a little perplexed on the answer, and I'm not sure if I ever received it. So out of this restriction area, the golf course restriction, can it be amended if the SRA, the developer in the division, meaning Division of Fish and Wildlife, approve in writing, can that be amended or released?
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, thank you. Just to provide some context, because I'm not sure town meeting is following the question. Mr. Bromberg has asked for my opinion again, which I think I've given multiple times, including in writing, about the restrictions that currently burden the site, including what was proposed to be a golf course in a prior iteration of the plan. Like any recorded restriction, it has provisions to be amended. They're onerous. It doesn't happen lightly, and those restrictions were perpetual. They are issued by a governmental body, and that governmental body is a state agency. And so, in my opinion, my legal opinion, this is not an issue for Rockland Town Meeting in connection with these articles. I'm happy to answer the question, but it really is irrelevant to what you're doing tonight.
Mr. Moderator, there's been mailings that say, and it was mentioned tonight, that 82% of the Rockland area is going to be open space, forever restricted. So I question, because the golf course restriction area that I'm speaking of has been amended twice already, so it can be amended. In 2017, it was going to be amended again when L-Star was presenting something to Natural Heritage, and it was approved by this Board of Selectmen and was endorsed by the Open Space Committee. And we lost 78 acres of open space with that agreement. So I have to question whether or not this can be.
It's going to be what?
This can be amended. I think you did say if the state agency agrees that they can amend it. And if that's the case, I have to wonder, but all this MUDD, mixed-use development, that's in this open space, if they can change that at some point in the future and say, hey, if the SRA, the developer, and the Division of Fish and Wildlife say, yeah, you can change it, we agree, then we're going to lose some restricted open space out there. So what we're looking for is the very strongest, possible strongest conservation restriction that we can put in all this land that's proposed to remain as open space in perpetuity. And I've been asking for that, our committee's been asking that for months, and we're not getting any response. Why, if it's going to be protected in perpetuity, can it not be put in the best, strongest protection there is?
Mr. Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To be clear, the prior amendments were made to an instrument by the same exact parties. So in other words, when L-Star was the developer, they amended their plans and they were able to amend the restriction when the plans changed because it was the same exact parties. You heard Mr. Tuig, who gave the master developer's presentation. He said it is their risk whether or not the state agency will allow the amendments that would make the development possible in Rockland. The whole project is presupposed that those recorded restrictions will and can be amended. They're not done lightly. They are perpetual. They're administered by the state agency that protects wildlife habitat, natural heritage. And in my legal opinion, They already are the strongest form of legal protection allowed under law to protect open space.
Could I ask you, Mr. Murphy, in the developable area, in the yellow in Rockland, in the northwest corner, that's all developable, correct? That's proposed to be developed? The northwest corner, the left upper corner, that's proposed to be developed.
Are you talking about in Weymouth or Rockland?
In Rockland, the top left corner, next to abutting Abington, in Rockland.
That's not really a legal question. I believe
No,
that...
my question, I guess, I'm sorry. My question would be, that's developable area. They propose to develop that. That is also under the golf course restriction. So it will have to be amended so they can develop that. Am I not correct?
You're asking about the developer's plans. What's before town meeting is a map and a set of bylaws that will rezone the entire base. That's already been adopted in Abington and South Weymouth. What happens with a state agency and title documents that are recorded is, as Mr. Tuig said, the developer's risk and legally irrelevant for town meeting tonight.
Well, I think if they say it's going to be put in a restriction and be permanent, then we want to make sure it gets the best thing. All right.
I think he's answered your question, Mike.
Okay.
Mike, I think you've answered asked a lot of questions.
Okay.
Where's my motion? Who stand up? Who's the my motion? Motion to move. Where do I see my hand? I want to see it. Gentleman right there. I have a motion to move the question. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of moving the question signify with the show of hands. All those opposed, that's a vote. This one vote for these three articles is going to require a 2/3 vote. I'm going to ask my tellers to come forward because I'm going to count this to make sure it's legal. Will my tellers come forward? All those in favor of adopting Article 9, 10, and 11 as one vote signify with the show of hands. Section 3? 60, 60? Section 1? 68. Section 2. All those not in favor of adopting Article number 9, 10, and 11 as one vote signify with the show of hands and keep them up. Section 3, 7. Section 1. Section 2. 22. approved, 241 against, 38. Total vote counted was 279. Of that, we needed 186. You have voted 2/3 to approve Articles 9, 10, and 11 as one vote. Need a motion to dissolve the special town meeting.
Motion to dissolve.
Do I have a second? All in favor? And thank you for coming.